Let's talk about how you get started and how to structure your training. The concepts are few, the methods are many. It's one of my favorite quotes. The concepts are few, the methods are many. The concepts of building endurance, building fitness, the concepts are few, but there's many different ways to get there. There's many different methods. There's a bunch of different coaches out there who do things differently. They have different methods that work different ways for different people. And I don't think that there is one way that is the right way. And there's not even necessarily one way that is better than the other. But we have to find methods that work for us. We have to find methods that we personally enjoy. We have to find and use methods that are sustainable and have longevity for how we want to train and the goals that we want to accomplish. Some people are very data-driven, like science nerds. And I like data, I respect data, I appreciate data, but I don't like to over-datafy a lot of my training. I'll look at it and I'll reflect upon it and I'll use it, but I don't solely rely on data to build out my training and assess how I feel. There is objective data, there is subjective data. Objective data is numbers, it is results, it is very clear, it's black and white. Subjective is a feeling, it is an emotion, there's a little bit of gray to it. Like when I wake up in the morning, if my watch says that I shouldn't run today based off my sleep, but I personally feel really solid and good, I want to go run, I'm going to go run, even if the data tells me I shouldn't. So the reason I share that is to say that don't get so caught up in the science, data, and the numbers. Just get out there and train. Listen to your body. Truly, listen to your body. If you feel you should take an off day, take an off day. If you feel that you should move some things around where it's supposed to be a speed workout, but you're feeling pretty taxed from the previous couple days or a week, maybe you replace that speed workout with another easy day and then hit your speed workout the next day or 2 days later. Just apply common sense to your training. Listen to your body. Don't get so caught up in the numbers. Now, one number that is useful to know, or at least understand, is our VO2 max. When it comes to endurance training and conditioning, you probably hear everyone talking about VO2 max. Everyone wants a higher VO2 max. And you can do a VO2 max test where you go into a lab and you put this mask on and they make you run or cycle at fast paces, and it gets faster over time. And what the VO2 max test identifies is the maximum amount of oxygen that you can utilize during an intense or maximal exercise. And the more oxygen a person can use during high level exercise, the more energy a person can produce. So your VO2 max will improve over time. It can improve over time as you become more efficient and you build fitness. But the higher your VO2 max, the more oxygen you can use, and the fitter you will become and you will be for your endurance training. So a lot of people will look at VO2 max, people will look at heart rate training. I personally use heart rate training more than VO2 max. And there are corresponding improvements in data simultaneously to VO2 max and heart rate when it comes to endurance training. But for me, it's a lot easier to measure heart rate in real time as opposed to VO2 max. VO2 max is one of those tests you can go do, and then you can establish some percentages based off of your VO2 max to set your ranges of training, like your zones of training. But you can also do the same thing when it comes to heart rate. So that's what I do. I use heart rate and I monitor my heart rate in real time to establish my zones and find out what I need to be aiming towards in some of these workouts. So what I do, and if you have a smartwatch, whether you have like a Garmin or a Coros, there are heart rate monitors built into these watches. They are not the most accurate. So what I would recommend doing is, one, I would recommend using heart rate training over VO2 max percentages, just my personal preference. And then I would get an external heart rate monitor that either goes around your bicep or your chest, and that will sync via Bluetooth to your watch so you can monitor your heart rate in real time as you're training. This is super beneficial for your easy aerobic zone 2 runs, where what I do is like I try to keep my heart rate between, or I should say below 145 beats per minute for my easy runs. I like using the Maffetone method to establish my max aerobic heart rate. So the MAF 180 formula is if you take 180 minus your age, that number you get is your max aerobic heart rate. Now, it's not your max heart rate, max aerobic heart rate. Again, I want to reiterate that this is just one of the methods to establish your zone for aerobic running, easy base building running. 180 minus your age, that's your max aerobic heart rate. So then what I do when I go run is I make sure that when I'm running and the goal is just an easy run, which 80% of your running should be your easy runs. It's just building volume and you're experiencing all these physical adaptations that are happening during those easy runs. Is I'm making sure by monitoring my watch, which is connected to my external heart rate monitor, that my heart rate is staying below my max aerobic heart rate. That's just me playing it safe, making sure that I'm staying in the right zone that I want to be for majority of my running. And then when I go into some of my other structured training, I will obviously be shooting for or aiming towards higher heart rates. So with all of that being said, about 80% of our running should be done in that aerobic base building zone. And that's also going to be about 60 to 75% of our VO2 max. And then when we layer on or refine some speed work into our programming, especially when it comes to a endurance training build, we have lactate threshold and then we have critical velocity. A lot of my lactate threshold work will be done during these tempo runs that I do, which again, an example of a tempo run for me might be like a 2-mile warm up. And then I do 3-mile tempo, 1 mile easy, 3-mile tempo, 1 mile easy, 2-mile tempo, 1 mile cool down. So I'm doing these segments of faster paces, which are lactate threshold. I'm trying to improve efficiency of building lactate into my blood and then accumulating that lactate and my body becoming more efficient at clearing that lactate. And that's, like I said, lactate threshold, about 80% of our VO2 max. And lactate threshold is the exercise intensity or blood lactate concentration at which we can sustain a high intensity effort for a specific period of time. And during this lactate threshold training, our muscles get more metabolically stressed when there is a higher lactate accumulation. So we want to find during this lactate threshold, which again, about 80% of our VO2 max, where blood lactate concentration is increasing, but it's being able to be cleared efficiently but it's that upper range of clearance. It's like right before red line. And then we'll layer on another style or method into our training, and that's critical velocity. And this is where I spend time on the track. So every other week when I'm in a marathon prep, I will rotate between tempo and critical velocity. Again, tempo or lactate threshold is about 80% of VO2 max. Critical velocity on the track, shorter distances, faster paces, larger percentage of VO2 max, about 90% of VO2 max. So we have aerobic base building, we have lactate threshold or tempo, and then we have critical velocity. And in that order, it goes from aerobic base building, you're running your slowest. Lactate threshold, you're running faster. Critical velocity, you're running your fastest. Aerobic base building, highest mileage. Lactate threshold, shorter distances, multiple segments. Critical velocity, the shortest distances, but again, higher paces that you can only hold for a certain period of time. So like a critical velocity workout, for example, might be a 2-mile warm-up, 10 times 800 meter repeats with 60 seconds of rest in between, and then a 2-mile cooldown. But those 800 meter repeats are done at a very fast pace, being a high percentage of our VO2 max. And when it comes to training volume, some of the things that we want to keep in mind as we go into a build for a race or a competition, or you're just getting started with your running, we want to slowly increase training volume. And a good rule of thumb is no more than a 10% increase in training volume from week to week. Because what happens if you increase training volume or running mileage, in this case, too fast, too quick? You put yourself at risk of injury, overuse injury, any type of injury. But that's typically experienced from increasing volume too quickly.